Tonight, system failure. The president says U.S. intelligence knew al-Qaeda in Yemen was planning to attack the U.S. and was recruiting someone to do it, but failed to put the pieces together. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, how vigilant is the TSA? Watch as a man easily breaches security at Newark Liberty Airport after an officer leaves his post unguarded. And where America stands in the battle against obesity and what's being done to save our children.
Just what I used to look like and then what I look like now kind of upsets me.
From CBS News World Headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. The White House laid it all out today, just how U.S. intelligence failed to detect and stop that Christmas Day terror plot. And President Obama addressed the nation to outline the steps he's taking to fix the system. The president took responsibility for the failure, saying, quote, "The buck stops with me." But he also ordered intelligence agencies to assign clear lines of responsibility for following leads and sharing information. And he ordered improvements in the system for putting people on the no-fly list. Chip Reid is at the White House tonight. And Chip, this review is really a stinging indictment of the intelligence community.
It certainly is, Katie. The report says that intelligence agencies knew that al-Qaeda in Yemen was actively recruiting people to attack the United States, but those agencies failed to follow through.
Rather than a failure to collect or share intelligence, this was a failure to connect and understand the intelligence that we already had.
The review ordered by the president finds that the U.S. government had sufficient information prior to the attempted December 25 attack to have potentially disrupted the al-Qaeda plot. But when the president met in the Oval Office to review terrorist threats just 3 days before the attack, Umar Farouk Abdul-Muttalib was not even on the list, despite a series of red flags.
What's new here and what's important and dramatic is the fact that you have an al-Qaeda affiliate trying to hit the homeland directly.
Numerous officials, including the president's top Homeland Security advisor, say they share in the blame.
I told the president today, I let him down.
The head of the National Counterterrorism Center left for a ski vacation shortly after the attack, communicating with the White House by secure phone. Still, the president said no single individual or agency is to blame.
For ultimately, the buck stops with me. As president, I have a solemn responsibility to protect our nation and our people. And when the system fails, it is my responsibility.
The report makes numerous recommendations for strengthening the system, including disseminating intelligence reports more widely and more quickly, ascertaining U.S. visa status of all suspected terrorists, and expanding the no-fly list. Perhaps in response to critics who say the president's response to the Christmas Day incident has been too mild, he adopted his strongest tone yet.
We are at war. We are at war against al-Qaeda.
The president said intensive efforts to fix the system will continue for months, but after 2 weeks of dealing with this issue around the clock, the White House would very much like to shift some of the focus back to health care and jobs. Katie?
Chip Reid at the White House. Chip, thanks very much. Now, right after he was arrested, Abdul-Muttalib told investigators he was trained and equipped in Yemen. Today, the government of that country provided new details about his activities, including his link to a Muslim cleric whose name has come up before. Terry McCarthy is following the terror trail in Yemen.
As the military hunts al-Qaeda in the countryside, the Yemeni government said today it is now certain that Omar Abdul-Muttalib met with al-Qaeda operatives in eastern Yemen and possibly even had contact with a radical US-born cleric also linked to the alleged Fort Hood gunman. There is no doubt that he was in contact with al-Qaeda in Shabwa province, he says, maybe with Anwar al-Awlaki. But there are still big gaps in the Nigerian story, as we found when we went to his old neighborhood here in the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. Muhammad al-Faqi was Abdul-Muttalib's neighbor. He said he used to disappear from his Arabic language school for 5 days or a week at a time. I asked his friends where did he go, he says, and they told me they didn't know. And today the Yemeni government said that Abdul-Muttalib completely disappeared from September 14th to December 7th, a time some speculate he might have spent in an al-Qaeda training camp in the desert. Figuring out precisely whom Abdul Talab met here in Yemen is important not just for his case, but crucially because it gives the US insight into how al-Qaeda here recruits and trains would-be suicide bombers. Yemenis are nervous that if their government doesn't go after al-Qaeda now, the US will.
It is best that we handle our problems ourselves in our own terms, rather than allow the international community to force us into situations that we don't like.
The US is already providing the Yemeni military with training and equipment and has made it clear at the very highest levels that they want results against al-Qaeda right away. Katie?
And Terry, I know Yemeni forces have been on the offensive all week long. Are they any closer to catching that al-Qaeda cleric al-Awlaki?
The Yemeni military says they do have some intelligence about where al-Awlaki is located, but it's very hard to know how close they are to capturing him. It's important to remember that in Yemen, outside the capital, the government has very little control. It's really under control of the tribes, and so it's difficult to know how close they are to actually getting to this radical cleric. Katie?
Terry McCarthy reporting tonight from Sana'a in Yemen. Terry, thank you. As Terry mentioned, al-Awlaki is also linked to the Army psychiatrist charged in the Fort Hood massacre. The two traded emails before the November 5th attack. Tonight, those exchanges are at the heart of another apparent failure by U.S. intelligence, one shockingly similar to the airline bombing case. National security correspondent David Martin has this exclusive report.
Less than a month after Major Nidal Hassan allegedly killed 13 people at Fort Hood, Texas, the Pentagon's top intelligence officer sent the White House a report detailing that earlier failure to connect the dots. According to that still classified report, the terrorism task force responsible for determining whether Hassan posed a threat never saw all 18 emails he exchanged with that radical Yemeni cleric al-Awlaki, whose communications were being monitored under a court-ordered wiretap. After the Washington task force decided Hassan was not dangerous, it never asked to see his subsequent communications with al-Awlaki.
And I think it is a real problem that you didn't have at one place and one time all of the communications being evaluated.
None of the emails specifically mentioned Hassan's plans for a shooting rampage at Fort Hood, but because he was a member of the military, the FBI showed them to a Pentagon investigator with the note "COM" written on it. To the FBI, that meant commissioned officer. The Pentagon investigator thought it meant communication. As a result, there were no red flags that an Army officer was emailing a radical cleric suspected of being a talent spotter for al-Qaeda.
Bottom line, Katie, the lessons of the Fort Hood shootings were not learned in time to avert the near disaster on Christmas Day.
David Martin at the Pentagon tonight. David, thank you. Now, after the attempt to blow up that Northwest Airlines plane on Christmas Day, we were told security at airports would be tightened. But 9 days later, security was breached without much effort at one of this nation's busiest airports, Newark. And today, Chief National Correspondent Byron Pitts tells us we got our first look at exactly how it happened.
Watch the man in the tan jacket, a fuzzy image on a security camera who last Sunday exploited a gaping security hole at Newark International Airport, causing near panic inside Terminal C. This surveillance tape shows what happened just after 5 p.m. The TSA agent approaches a man standing along the passenger exit lane and tells him to move away from the secure area. 5:20, that same TSA officer walks away from his post. He's gone for at least a minute. 5:21, the man in the tan jacket makes his move. Under the rope, then arm in arm and a kiss with a woman passenger who cleared security legally. Reports are the mystery man wanted to walk her to her gate. He was seen leaving the airport sometime later. 5:22, the TSA officer returns to his post, clueless about the security breach. It takes a bystander to alert the agent there was a problem. The tape comes from Continental Airlines' surveillance system because the TSA camera wasn't working Sunday or for several days prior.
Zero security this.
Isaac Yefet was security chief at Israel's El Al Airlines.
So terrorists would see that tape and think what?
He will say that still we never learned how to have a high level of security.
This was the latest TSA security lapse, but not the first. Just last month, TSA's security manual for all airport checkpoints was released on the internet. Authorities are still looking for the man in the tan coat. They hope someone recognized him. Katie?
Byron Pitts in Newark tonight. Thank you. And coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, where America stands on a growing national epidemic, the problem of obesity reaching the breaking point. Resolutions to lose some extra pounds are common this time of year, and they couldn't come soon enough. As we begin this new decade, the country is facing a dangerous weight problem. Consider this: in the late 1970s, 15% of American adults were obese. By the early 90s, that number had jumped to 23%, and most recently, 35%. So how do we reduce our waistlines and return to a healthier state? Seth Doane traveled the nation to weigh what's being done about this growing crisis as CBS reports where America stands.
Okay, 3-piece dark crispy and a Diet Pepsi.
The evidence of an epidemic is everywhere. 2/3, 190 million Americans, are overweight or obese.
If you had to grade the United States when it comes to obesity,
well, I'd give us an F.
A national report card no one is proud of. Obesity-related diseases are a nearly $150 billion medical burden every year.
We're going to end up as a nation of cardiac cripples.
Childhood obesity has tripled in the last 30 years. This could be the first generation since the Civil War to have a shorter life expectancy.
It's not hurting, is it?
To gauge the problem, a team of doctors and cardiologists from Houston's Memorial Hermann Hospital set up a MASH unit of sorts in a middle school gym.
You're almost done. Just a few more pictures of your heart, okay?
Running a battery of tests on 97 seemingly healthy children.
I think it is a communication between the aorta and the pulmonary.
But the results?
Houston, we have a problem.
Reveal an alarming reality here.
3 out of every 4 children are either overweight or obese.
That means about 70 of these children are on a high-risk trajectory for coronary artery disease by their 30s and 40s. Dr. Joshua Samuels treats kids with the blood pressure levels of an unhealthy adult. Back at his clinic, 11-year-old Wesley Randall has dangerously high blood pressure and is 60 pounds overweight.
I just eat to solve my problems for some reason.
A few years down the road, these are the people who are going to be flooding into our hospitals and emergency rooms.
15-year-old Emily Allen is trying to avoid just that.
Just what I used to look like and then what I look like now kind of upsets me.
The Hudson, Michigan teen was healthy at age 5, but by 10, she'd become obese and could no longer fit into kids' clothing.
Why did I look like that?
It seems to me that there's some degree of pain or hurt in
guilt.
Looking at that. Guilt?
Mm-hmm.
Why guilt?
I just feel guilty that I couldn't change it earlier.
On doctor's orders, Emily joined a weight loss program called Empower at the University of Michigan.
That's better.
Where she's already lost 26 pounds, thanks in part to support from other teens like 16-year-old Amber Bell, who's in an even scarier life and death struggle. She's shed 50 pounds, but still weighs nearly 400.
What made you say, I am gonna make a change here?
I didn't want my parents to feel like I was a failure, and I wanted to have friends.
For Amber, Emily, and so many families, the battle started with money.
So we kind of had to start buying cheaper foods and
that's when you started gaining weight?
Yeah.
Is it a luxury to be able to eat healthy food?
It's becoming more of a luxury.
Kelly Brownell studies obesity at Yale University and says the government does not help by subsidizing corn, an ingredient in virtually every sweetener. Corn farmers were paid $56 billion over the last 10 years by the federal government to grow their crop. Produce farmers, not a dime.
If you go to McDonald's today, you can buy a quarter-pounder with cheese meal. That means the large drink and the large French fries for less than it costs to buy a salad and a bottle of water. There's something wrong with that picture.
We all remember that idyllic Norman Rockwell picture of 1950s America, but that has certainly changed. Today we consume more than 500 extra calories a day than a quarter century ago. It's easy to see why in a place like Baldwin Park, California, population 81,000.
With 6 fast food restaurants or convenience stores for every one place that offers fresh produce, this community might seem at the root of the problem. But in fact, it's on the forefront of a grassroots solution.
Here, they're trying to innovate. Connie Gonzalez and her mother, Maria,
here, Connie,
volunteer with the program Healthy Kids, Healthy Communities. The group pushed for a ban on new drive-through windows. Since 2006, not a single fast food restaurant has opened.
Here.
Fresh produce is now stocked in stores that never carried it.
Maybe the big one?
And Maria flags the healthy food for shoppers. Connie helped convince the school board to make salad bars a staple. And 100 minutes of weekly phys ed is now mandatory. With all this, in 5 years, 135 kids here are no longer overweight.
Why does it take a whole community?
Because one individual can't really change much, but if a city comes together, we can change a whole lot.
But that's not enough, says Kelly Brownell. He likens the war on obesity to the one against tobacco.
The parallels are stunning. Marketing to children, distorting the science, influencing policymakers and the like.
The consumer is bombarded by the food industry, which spent $30 billion on advertising last year. And even the world's largest nutrition group, the American Dietetic Association, has a list of sponsors that includes the very companies selling unhealthy products.
The single best thing that ever happened to fight tobacco were high taxes on cigarettes.
Those taxes increased the cost for a pack of cigarettes and led to a drastic drop in smoking. Brownell's studies show that a penny per ounce tax on sugared beverages like soda would cut consumption and raise billions that could fight obesity.
Isn't it our own responsibility to moderate our behavior?
The personal responsibility approach is a fine place to start, but we've been doing that for 40 years now, and we're losing the battle with obesity. That's been an experiment that has failed.
But additional taxes and more regulation are certainly a tough sell. A CBS News poll released just minutes ago shows that 60% of people oppose a tax on junk food. So while we may agree that something must be done in this battle against obesity, Katie, we do not agree on what.
Meanwhile, junk food and no PE seems like a recipe for disaster for so many kids in this country. It's heartbreaking.
It is.
And good luck to all those kids who are trying to get healthier. Seth Doan, thanks so much for that great report. And for more on this series in partnership with USA Today, you can go to cbsnews.com. We'll link you to a calculator to figure out your body mass index. And you can let us know where you stand on the issues we've been covering. Tomorrow, drinking water. We're the world's biggest consumer of it, and we take for granted we'll always have it. But some of our major sources are drying up.
It is definitely at the crisis level.
A lot of travelers could be stuck in airports tonight thanks to a storm moving through America's midsection. More than 400 flights were canceled today at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. The city could get a foot of snow by tomorrow. Icy roads are being blamed for a deadly crash today near Springfield, Ohio. A tractor trailer swerved into oncoming traffic, hitting a bus carrying disabled adults. 4 people on that bus were killed, including the driver. 7 others were injured. And in frigid Minot, North Dakota today, the temperature signs read 20 below zero, but with the wind chill, it felt like -50. So cold, frostbite can hit exposed skin within minutes. And finally tonight, basketball's next superstar may be playing for a girls' prep school team in New Jersey. A bold statement considering she just took up the sport. But as Jim Axelrod tells us, this teenager is remarkable in more ways than one.
It's not every day a Bubbles Anderson comes walking through your door, after she ducks her head, of course. Especially if you're a basketball coach.
Once in a lifetime, 6'10", 6'11", comes your way.
6'10" would make this 16-year-old tied for the tallest girl in the world.
What number do you wear when you play games?
23.
23? Why 23?
Because
Michael Jordan and LeBron James.
You're taller than both of them.
Yeah.
Nearly half a foot taller than Jordan, 2 inches taller than James, and Bubbles is still growing.
What did the doctors say? How tall are you going to get?
At least 7'1".
So 7-footer, 7'1", 7'2".
I'm still a girl.
She came here last summer from Jamaica looking for a better life. She ended up at Rutgers Prep in New Jersey.
Okay, use your shoulders.
On the basketball team. Even though Bubbles had never played the sport before, she's a natural.
If she continues to grow as a player the way she has the last 3 months, she's going to redefine the game because of her size and her athleticism.
Establishing an identity can be the toughest part of a teenager's life. And when you're just under 7 feet tall, an identity would seem ready-made. But ask your classmates about what makes Bubbles so special. You might be surprised at the answers. Give me one word.
Hilarious.
We asked a dozen classmates to describe this sophomore in a word.
Lovable, friendly,
outgoing. She's loud.
Not one said tall, which is something considering Bubbles Anderson is head and shoulders above the crowd. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, Somerset, New Jersey.
And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. The news continues round the clock at cbsnews.com. Good night.